Hey, 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 hey! We are back yet again for another episode of Relationship Topia. It is your host. This is Dr. Terrell Ravenel and Jill Speaks Truth here, live and in color, black and white and color. We're excited for another episode. We are still talking about Don't Get Married If. So we've been talking about the attachment styles and how that impacts relationships and all that stuff. So we've already gone over one of the insecure attachment styles last week, which was the ancient attachment style, ancient. I can't talk today. Anxious attaches smile, and we have already declared what the attachment, what anxiousness means, and the attachment style, what it means when you're detached, if you would, or insecure in the relationship with mother and child. It's like a break in care. It's a division in care, if you would. So today, we're going to talk about the avoidant attachment. So Jill is going to start us off and really just dig into the definition of the avoidant, and then we're going to get right into this conversation. So get your pens, get your paper, if you're listening to this and you're like, you know what, this doesn't apply to me, I'm not dealing with this. I bet you know somebody that is. You may have a child or grandchild. You may have a friend or a family member that is. And what this information is going to help you do is to better understand how to deal with them and manage those relationships. And even if they're open, helping them to learn how to manage with other relationships. So don't ever think that it always has to apply directly to you, but it always applies indirectly to you. With that said,
Absolutely. And I think, Trell, that oftentimes people are so almost quick to assume and resonate with saying, oh, I'm a secure attachment style, without really looking at it closer. And I would say, if you've had unhealthy relationships or just have been struggling in the relationship department, chances are you may be on the insecure spectrum, which is either we're talking about the avoidance or the anxious style, which we talked about last time. So don't be so dismissive of it. And also don't just automatically put such a negative connotation. It's just a way of being, and it's not so much about having a certain style or having like the stigma of a certain type of attachment style, as much as it is understanding how you have been created, how you move, and being able to navigate and manage yourself in relationships better. So with that being said, I'm just going to give you a textbook definition when it comes to avoidant attachment. It really, as Trell has alluded to, develop in your childhood, and often stems based off of how your parents relate to you, and particularly your mother. It's really, that's where it kind of ends and begins with the mother. And if you felt like or even perceived that your mother was not responsive to your needs, then when y'all had a break in care, it could be because your mom went to work. It could be because maybe your mother had to go away for a couple of days, weeks, or what have you. And then when it was time to reconnect, your instincts was to shy away from her rather than to gravitate towards. And a lot of times, unless your parent tells you this, you may not know. We're talking about from the ages of infancy to maybe 2, 3 is pushing it. So a lot of times it's hard to even know how you responded when you was 2. I mean, personally, I don't remember anything before 5 years old. Like, you asked me something before 5, like, I have no recollection of the event in question. And so I believe a lot of times we all have like this, I remember everything from this point on. It was like, before that time, I don't know, it was a lack of awareness, a lack of being able to remember, that a lot of times we don't know. So this may be a conversation you have to have with your mother to find out how you responded. How did you reconnect when she went away to work? Were you the one? Well, I guess I'm getting too anxious. I'm trying to stay to the avoidance side. But if you, like I said, did not want to reconnect or kind of shied away, then that may be indicative that you have more of an avoidance attachment style. And it's like, in that moment as a child, even, you became more independent and reliant on yourself physically and more emotionally rather than on a parent. And what happens in the mental, even at that young age, is like, I can't depend on other people, so I have to depend on myself. So that's kind of the mindset and the framing that's happening even at that young stage.
Yeah, that's good. And that's absolutely right, Jill. And that's a great way just to segue into the childhood relationship. And again, please keep keep an open mind while you're listening to this, because I guarantee you, like I said before, you know someone that may demonstrate some of these characteristics that we're going to share with you. So that avoidant attachment style, like Jill was saying, the individual, instead of craving intimacy like the anxious attachment style, and last week we did also determined that anxious attachment style individuals and avoidant attachment style individuals typically get together, and that's wild just to kind of think about it, because they're doing the opposite of what the other person needs. So instead of that person craving intimacy, they're very wary of getting close to other people, so they avoid that emotional connection. And in the childhood relationship, what a child tends to do is, since their needs are not regularly being met by a caregiver, somebody that is supposed to protect them, somebody that is supposed to demonstrate or display love toward them, they are forced to distance themselves emotionally because they do something called self-soothing. They try to self-soothe. They try to self-protect. It's like they're putting a shield around them per se, because they know that if they get close to this individual, based on how the relationship was, based on what they've already experienced with this individual, that they are going to get hurt. So they tend to try to self-protect themselves. So this builds a foundation of avoiding intimacy and craving independence in later life, like Jill talked about. And we will talk a little bit about that more as far as what the adult relationship would look like if someone is in a romantic relationship, when it comes to craving independency. So even when that independence and lack of intimacy may cause distress, this person, again, because they are soothing the child, again, because they're self-soothing and self-protecting in their mind, and what their body is even telling them, that it's safer for me to distance myself, even if it may cause me some distress or disappointment or things of that nature. So children who have developed this avoidant attachment style, if you would, they have learned to accept their own emotional needs and are likely to remain unmet. So these needs go unmet, and they continue to grow up feeling unloved, insignificant. They struggle with self-esteem, a lack of confidence. These children grow into adults, and they may even struggle with anxiety. I know angels and anxiety is the same thing, but they still experience some levels of anxiety, because you worry about not being loved, not being accepted, not belonging. These individuals can deal with depression and just a number of things, because there's rejection, right? So even though they are turning away from the relationship to self-soothe and self-protect, that's still a form of rejection. They're forced to take care of themselves. They're forced to cater to their own emotional needs. And just think about that for a moment. A 5 or 7, 10, 15-year old, they're left to their own devices, if you would, to take care of themselves emotionally. Most adults, Joe, can't even take care of themselves emotionally. So just imagine a
Facts.
child, okay? Just imagine a child trying to do that. So they often struggle with expressing their feelings and finding it hard to understand emotions. You ever met someone that, instead of telling you how they feel, maybe you are that person, or have been that person, or have been in the relationship with that person, they, instead of them telling you or you telling them how you feel, you avoid it at all costs, because telling them how you feel, that may cause rejection. That may cause the person that you love or is supposed to love you and care about you to turn away from you. So it's almost a sense, I'm getting a little bit into the adulthood, but even in the adulthood, and I see this in children as well, that deal with avoiding, it's almost like they walk on eggshells, because they don't want to say the wrong thing, with the fear of that person, that parent, that caregiver turning away from them. So sometimes parents may feel overwhelmed or anxious when confronted with the child's emotional needs, and close themselves off emotionally as well. So there are a number of things that you can probably identify in a child that maybe perhaps in your own child. And again, this is to get them support now, and not wait until they get into an adult relationship for them to have to deal with these things. So these are just a few things of what it would look like in the childhood relationship of a child that is experiencing the avoidant attachment style.
Absolutely. Good stuff, sis. And I'm going to kind of go into, and I think that's a great segue of how does that play out in romantic relationships. And well, I want to go, before we even get into that, I want to go back to what you said, that avoidance and anxious attachment styles tend to gravitate towards each other. But actually, what is ideal is if avoidance get with secure and anxious get with secure, because they can kind of help balance it out. What I found to be true is in a romantic relationship, if somebody's avoidant, they're going to make the anxious person more anxious. Right? Versus if somebody has an anxious attachment style, they want somebody that's secure, that person is going to validate, that person is going to be more affirming, that person is going to show up in a way that's going to reduce the anxiety that anxious partner would have. And the same thing is true with the avoidant partner. That avoidant partner, when they start to pull away, a secure person is going to just let them do what they do, and them taking that space is going to create more level for it. So you may say, well, how does exactly avoidance show up in relationships? Let's answer that question. Of course, they're going to be avoiding the emotional closeness in the relationship. They may find when difficult situations come up or when they're feeling away, their tendency is going to be to withdraw, cope with difficult situations alone. They want to kind of get away. They want to think. They want to take a break. Just kind of distance themselves. They tend to suppress their emotions, which is something that is not beneficial. But that's kind of, if you find yourself tending to suppress, not wanting to show when you're angry, maybe not even showing affection, not being vulnerable, and not just the physical, right? We're not just talking about physical touching and things like this, but I'm talking about, can you really share your feelings? Can you tell somebody when you're afraid? Can you tell somebody when you're feeling insecure? Can you tell somebody when you're really digging them or whatever? Or do you tend to shy away? And even like I said, when it comes to like your anger and being annoyed or whatever, or is it like a hidden thing and you're not trying to show it? So that's leading to the avoidance type of behavior. And other things you'll see: avoid complaining, prefer to suck it up, may hint at something, kind of maybe passive, sometimes maybe even get into other things beyond passive, but really you'll just see suppressing is going to be a pattern that you see. Also, they deal with a fear of rejection, right? Which is also going to be on the anxious side. So this is where they have some commonalities there, where they are afraid to be rejected. And sometimes this fear of rejection further drives them to avoid and actually have this like self-sabotage and self-prophecy of the thing that they don't want to happen because they're so afraid that it will. And they just started moving in that direction, trying to brace themselves for the impact that's coming, which is what I realize in relationships, and I try to tell people this because a lot of times people deal with fear of rejection or trust or whatever. And I had an opportunity. I was on the plane coming from Cancun recently, and I was talking to two young ladies. And in that conversation, one of the young ladies was saying, "I'm just so afraid." And I was like, "Don't be afraid when it comes to a relationship. The truth is, people are going to disappoint you. Let's just clear the air right there." Right? That's going to happen. I think if we get more a posture and a mindset and understanding that in relationships, not if you're going to be, you will be disappointed. I'm not saying that person's necessarily going to leave you or it's not going to work out. That may or may not happen. But at the end of the day, once we start to embrace that disappointment is part of life, and that is, we get to be vulnerable, and we even have to be willing to get hurt to really experience deep connection with people and stop running from it like the plague. And having that mindset that if that does happen, or when it does happen, come on, because it's not about if, it's when it happens, we have the capacity, the fortitude, the resilience within us to overcome whatever obstacle that happens. And that way it gives us more bandwidth to be able to show up more boldly and without fear, because fear definitely is the opposite of faith, and just having faith that things will work out. So a couple other things I'll say about the avoidance and how that play out in relationships is really, again, we talked about having that strong sense of independence, which is hard to do life with somebody else when you are just really committed, going your own way. And, and then your partner's going to feel rejected. And it just is not going to foster a healthy, thriving relationship. It just will not. About a year ago, some saying came to me. It's like, you got to go together to go together. I don't know, when we was in high school, college, and maybe even still today, people are like, oh yeah, we go together, right? And it's like we're in a relationship. And so I take that literally. Like, if you're going to go together, if you're going to be in a relationship, in a marriage, then you need to go together. You need to do things together. You need to communicate. You need to connect. You cannot run from it. It's not healthy. And so, and not even so much healthy, it's just not beneficial. And ultimately, you won't have fulfilling relationships operating in this space. So you get to find other ways to navigate it. Also, may have a feeling of, like, I'm gonna say high self-esteem, or maybe feeling yourself, and have the tendency to see other people as, negative light. And lastly, but definitely not least, the core of it all is really just having being so invested, overly invested in your needs and in your own comfort, which you have to be really careful about that, because you don't want to come off as self-centered or selfish, that you just really absorb about what you need. In relationships, it's so important to remember that you're there to serve the need of your partner, and you have to come with that
Mm.
energy. But if you're so engulfed in your own need, it impedes your ability and capacity to show up for your partner in a strong way.
That's good. That's good. And before I finish up, because we're coming to a close here, and really want to talk about how you can manage, because we don't believe that you can necessarily 100% overcome, but we do believe that you can be 80% better, right? You can be 90% better in that relationship. And Joe, when you were talking about it just now, and talking about how it plays out in the romantic relationship, we have to understand that, these individuals that deal with this type of attachment style, they're triggered, right? Especially if they haven't worked through any of these areas, if they don't even know why they are the way they are showing up in their relationship the way that they're showing up. So I want to talk, just go back quickly to bring this to light, as far as what they're probably experiencing from their partner. What they're experiencing from their partner is the same thing they perhaps experience from their mother or it seems the same, right? There's similar dynamics, because the behavior that it fosters is the child routinely refuses the parent routinely refuses to acknowledge their child's cries or other shows of distress or fear. And we've talked about John Gottman before, and how he teaches on the attunement and bids of connection. That's the same thing. So if a child is crying for their parent, because they're wet or they're hungry or they're sad or they just need something, and that parent ignores them, that is likened into if your wife or your husband gives you a bid for connection, say, hey, honey, or can you come here for a minute, or what are you doing? And if you ignore them, if you continue to do something else, if you completely dismiss them, it feels the same way it felt when that mother ignored that child, right? Parents of these children actively suppresses their child's display of emotions. Again, going back to, attuning. They tell them, stop crying, grow up, toughen up. This is likened into your spouse telling you, that's not my problem. That's your issue. It's not
Mm-hmm.
my issue. You have the problem. I don't have the problem. It's you, not me. So we have to understand that what is happening in the dynamic of that relationship or that conversation, as to why that individual is feeling the way that they felt when they were 5 or when they were 10. Again, these parents become angry or physically separated from the child. So when the child perceives that, give off, being disobedient or showing emotion, not even being disobedient, but just showing an emotion that the parent don't necessarily like or can relate to, the parent gets angry or leaves out of the room or hits the child or something like that. This is likened to the same way a spouse, if the wife or husband expresses their emotion, then they turn it on you, they gaslight you, they project on you. So we have to understand all those dynamics to understand why this individual is acting this way or perceived to be acting this way, because they are triggered, and it puts them back in the same mindset. It puts them back in the same place they were when they were experiencing that quote unquote abuse from that parent. And when the reason why I'm saying abuse is because anytime you're neglecting your child, whether you meant to do that or not, that is a form of emotional abuse. And now here they are in a married or romantic relationship, and they are still being verbally, many cases, and emotionally neglected. So I just wanted to share that to kind of bring that all to light. So, hope is not lost. Hope is not lost, because even if you are experiencing this, your spouse is experiencing this, or the individual that your significant other or your child or someone, there are things that you can do to that they can do, there are things that you can do to help to manage you so that it does not have to ruin relationships, and not just romantic relationships, Jill, right? Because how you show up in one area is how you show up in other
For
areas, so that
sure.
you can help manage and foster other relationships and foster other your being aware why you're feeling the way you're feeling, not allowing shame or guilt or embarrassment of your feelings cause you to feel that way, learning how to breathe through the emotion when the anxiety does come, learning different breathing techniques. We talked about meditating on the word of God on last week, and just really understanding why you feel that way, and helping to calm your nervous system down. Telling yourself that you're safe, you're psychologically safe, you're emotionally safe, you're you're safe in that environment, because a lot of times it's not what you think. I'm not saying that is never that case. There is some cases where that spouse or that significant other is treating you a certain way, but sometimes it is because of your triggers and because of your experience. Now you're experiencing, you're hypersensitive. You can be hyper or hyposensitive in some cases, and your parasympathetic nervous system, is going all kind of ways. You have that fight, flight, or freeze. You're trying to fight. You're fighting your way out. Are you going to leave that situation, or you just kind of freeze up in that moment? So you have to be able to recognize what's happening. Another way is resist the repression of emotions. You don't have to repress or suppress your emotions. That's a huge mistake. Now, granted, you don't want to just go off and screaming, yelling, and crying and carrying on. Sometimes you may have to do that, just depending on what's happening. But you want to be able to feel the emotion. I feel sad, I feel mad, I feel hurt, I feel upset, I feel disappointed. Whatever that is, feel it and say what you feel. If you need to breathe through it before you share with your partner, I feel this way when. We talked about, I believe last week, we talked about I statements. I feel this way when. I feel angry when. I feel sad when. I feel disappointed when. Being able to know that and say that is going to be very, very, very helpful, because you don't feel like you have to hold it all in, because holding it all in is not going to be good for you or your significant other or the people that are around you. Number 3, express your needs and desires to your loved one. You might be saying, well, Dr. Trail, I have a person, I have a spouse or a significant other. I can't express my emotion because they don't hear me. They don't want to hear me. They're not listening. They may get angry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Listen, if you need to get professional support to help guide you in that, do that. But also ask your significant other, hey, there's some things that I would like to share with you. Can we schedule a time in a place that we can have a 10 or 15-minute conversation? Bite-sized chunks, right? You don't have to go in there and spill everything. Just, I have to share one thing with you. This is something I need to share with you. And I always say, if your partner is reasonable and considerate and they love you, they will want to have that conversation. I only see when individuals are just completely unreasonable, selfish. They can give a hoot about how you feel, and they're not committed. Those are the individuals I'm not talking about. I'm talking about if you're with someone and you know that, okay, she loves me, he loves me, they really want to help me work through this. We're committed to this relationship. And although it seems like they're always complaining or something's always wrong, because I love them, I'm committed. I want to hear them out, and I'm committed to doing that. So let's set a time to do that. And another one is allow yourself to trust others. With this avoidant attachment, again, you're going back to not being able to really trust the person that should have been there for you. And for whatever reason, again, it could have been work, could have been military, could have been a number of things, right? It's not always because they just intentionally neglected you, but the person that should have been there for you during those stages of your young adulthood, young adult life, young child life, I'm sorry, was not there. Now you have issues with trust. So tell yourself that this is a different scenario. This is a different person. And you have to learn to begin to trust that person. So you start small and doing things that will create an environment of trust and growing that trust. And then the last one is just allow yourself to be dependent on others. It's okay. Like Joe said, allow yourself to get disappointed. Allow yourself to get hurt. And with that said, it's not like you just sit there and let somebody, beat on you. I'm not talking about physical beating. I'm just saying, just mistreat you. That's not what we're saying. But I mean, we're people, we're human beings. We're subject to hurting one another, even if it's subconsciously, unintentionally. The Bible talks about, there's unintentional sin. And even when there's unintentional sin, we still have to confess and we have to ask God for forgiveness for those things. So sometimes things do happen unintentionally. So allow yourself to depend on others, even if you feel like, oh, they're going to let me down. You don't know that. You don't know that. You're going based off, again, what you experienced as a young child, what others may have done. This may be a completely, totally different, separate situation. And guess what? Even if they do let you down, then that's when you go back and you let them know, I felt like I was let down when this happened, right? We have to get to the point where there's open, honest, and transparent communication to begin to talk through these areas of concern and the things that you're feeling and experiencing and have experienced, so that you can then foster a healthy, thriving relationship with others. So that's it. That's all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to share a couple things really quick just to add to what you're saying in terms of how to cope with it. One is that try really hard not to be dismissive and not to be defensive. Like validating what your partner says, even when you disagree, is so healthy. It's not saying that you're right. It's all it's saying is, I hear you and I understand how you feel that way. And then that goes into showing some empathy, right? And that may go with saying, hey, I'm sad that you feel that way. I'm sorry that you feel that way. Like just letting go back to what Cheryl's talking about, that's attunement. I see you feeling a way. And because I'm in relationship with you and I care about how you feel, I'm going to, and I hate to drop all these terms, we're going to unpack a lot of this too as we keep the conversation going, but co-regulate, meaning let me help you, support you in your emotional process, because I see you're needing me in this moment, and I'm going to do what I can to make you feel better. I mean, this is like, I think sometimes we just get away from the basic elements of relationship. Just act as if you care. Well, I hope you do care, but show that you care.
Yeah.
By being for them, being there for them in that moment. And lastly, I would add is identify what you need and tell your partner what you need. Even Cleo, we know, was a fake. Okay. There's nobody's no psych out here and know what and guessing, trying to figure out what you want. You get to sit down and get clarity about that and be able to communicate that in a healthy way and work from there. So we've given so much information. I hope you guys are taking notes, giving us feedback. Hopefully we're not giving you guys too much, but what do we want to encourage you to do? If you heard this, and whether you resonate with being an avoidant or not, I want you to take one or two of these skills that you've learned and see how you can apply them in your romantic relationships, but also just in your platonic relationships. I know for me, I'm learning to be a better listener. And so sometimes people telling me stuff, I'm so busy trying to solve the problem. They just listen. I'm like, okay, Joe, this is your opportunity to zip it and listen, right? So we have to learn to apply these skills so we can show up better and healthier and have more fulfilling relationships, because really that's what we're all after at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Absolutely. And next week, we're going to finish up with talking about the last attachment style, and that's the disorganized attachment style. So that's a mix of the avoidant and the ambivalent attachment style. So you want to be here next week and invite some folks to listen in as well. If you've been enjoying this podcast, if you've been enjoying the content, we want to hear from you. Let us know. Share it with individuals out there that are looking to have healthy, thriving, sustainable, and loving relationships. I think that's probably most of the people, though, Joe, isn't it?
Absolutely. But Cheryl, we've only been talking about the insecure attachment style. We still get to talk about secure attachment style. So we'll save
that'd be the last.
For the last.
Yeah. That'd be the very last.
5, whatever part it is.
I don't even know what this is. But listen. So we'll see you all next week. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye. Peace and blessings.